guys mind if I use Chrome instead of whatever? So greetings. I know some of you already. Sean? Yes? Your Facebook picture is really dark, but
I get
that guy looks evil. I bet it's, yeah.
I get inspiration from another guy. He was Bob and Dragon. He was Stu, but he does weird Facebook.
Well, this is actually me, believe it or not. It's painted by a friend of mine, Rembrandt. You might have heard of him. Actually, it's a picture of the philosopher by Rembrandt, but a student years ago took my face and put it on, for a computer graphics class. So he got an A for the course, and I got that. In fact, he gave me a printed copy of it, which for years I had in my office, which is pretty cool. And he gave me permission to put that there. In fact, if you click on it and you go down, you'll see I have Joseph Allen Butcher. He's the person that put that there, or gave it to me to use. So there. I don't give out paper copies of my syllabi. Instead, I just post them on the web. You can go, of course, through Blackboard to get to it by clicking on syllabus for the course, or you could just go directly to it on the UAA website. You don't have to go through Blackboard. They make us use Blackboard. You can see the scars on my back from, they're next to the Roman Catholic ones. No, I'm just kidding. No scars. In any case, you could call me Bill, or whatever you want, actually. Mein Herr Professor is okay, but that's silly. So don't go.
That's his students call him the banana dictator.
But I usually say the only thing I'd prefer you not call me is late for dinner, which I'm not really suggesting you have me over for dinner. But that would actually be nice, but that's okay. I do eat, as you can see, at least occasionally. 67 years worth. That's pretty impressive. I'm impressed. 67 years. That, all my life that was like old people. Now that I'm there, I'm like, hey, this is like what? Just last year I was only a toddler. What the heck? Okay, so that's me. Please call me whatever you like. I'll hopefully learn some of your names, especially in this class, because it's a smaller class. And I should be messing with your minds a lot more in this class than most, especially this one, since we're going all the way up to now, the focus. And it's when we changed the names of the courses, this one was History 2. We only had 2 history courses, History 1, History 2. History 1 covered ancient and medieval, and History 2 would cover modern and everything else. When I was in college, we had, besides Intro and Intro to Logic, I had Ancient, which was an 18-week, 3-credit course all by itself. Medieval, Dr. Strevler, absolutely fantastic. You'd think, who the heck wants to study medieval philosophy for 18 weeks, right? But it was actually fantastic because really human beings are fantastic, and we have been all the time. So, the dark ages, forget it. It's, or if you're from the East Coast, forget about it, right? Because they talk funny to you, And I can do it, too, because I was raised in Philly, so I know how to talk like that. It's pretty easy for me. It's another one of my languages, Sorry. I'm in a good mood. I don't know why. I shouldn't be. I'm having a colonoscopy tomorrow.
Oh, God.
Is that TMI? Too much information?
Everyone has to do it, eventually.
It's not my first. I had one, I guess 55 or whenever the heck it was. I forget. But, so I'm starving. I'm just, you know how it is. Or not. Maybe not. Maybe you don't know what those are. But for some reason, starving myself has put me in a good mood, which is weird. Maybe I should starve myself more often. At least every Friday. But so the medieval period really is absolutely full, crammed full of stuff. And if anything, mostly we end up forgetting an awful lot of it. Because we don't go back to the Czech monasteries and look through their ancient libraries and discover that, hey, all these new logic ideas, they had them too. You know, hundreds of years ago. But no one read the stuff, and so, you know, Descartes, wow, that's amazing. Who thought of that? Actually, he's just copying people like Augustine and stuff of that sort. And then, of course, we get the big fights today between relativism, Einstein, and steady-state universe concepts, Sir Isaac Newton. You know, you get that. I love talking about Galileo. Absolutely amazing. I read a book last year on Galileo by Heilbronn, which absolutely opened my mind to how dumb Galileo was. It's amazing. You know, we all think, oh, the church was dumb. Galileo was brilliant, you know, but you read all the nitty-gritty of, you know, the interaction and everything else, and you realize, whoa, Galileo was dumb. And, you know, well, I'll read that next week, or not next week, next Thursday. I'll bring in the Heilbronn book, and I'll read you the actual dialogue between Pope Urban VIII and Galileo, and it's absolutely amazing, because it still applies to today. The conflict between them, you know, Galileo thinking it's absolutely the case that the earth goes around the sun. And the Pope basically saying, you know, God could do whatever he wants, you know, leave it open, you know, right? Don't mess with it, you know, just leave it alone. You can say it's, you know, we can imagine it this way. Mathematically, it works out easier, right? You know, and today we've got, how many different models? We've got the Copernican model, you know, the idea that the sun is the center. We've got the idea of the, you know, the Ptolemaic model where the Earth was the center, right? Yeah. The geocentric model. And we've got Einstein that gives us just this is the typical picture you get, right? And this is you right here, right? You see, observer? That's you right here. And by the way, each of you have a different observer status, right? So if you think of it, if future's that way, past is that way, notice since you're the center and you're on the earth, what would be the center? The earth, right? Yeah. Right. You know, think about, you know, whoa, wait a minute. It gets worse, though. It gets worse because there are actually other models. There's the model today that we get from Brian Greene, who, if you're familiar with him, he's one of the people that has lots of videos on the science channels and things of that sort. He's the string theorist that has lots of really cool graphics. None of them are true, of course. They're all just made up computer graphics. But you could could go check him out. And he argues in his book, The Fabric of the Cosmos, that everything is basically forever where it is. Nothing really changes. The only thing that gives us the impression that things change is our own consciousness moving through time and space. So it's as Einstein puts us as the observer. The reason that everything seems to be moving is because I'm kind of, in fact, this is the model he uses. He says, say we have the DVD of Gone with the Wind, right? You know, the movie Gone with the Wind. You put it in a disc player, and all the little bits that are permanently stored on the disc are viewed to make it look like they're moving, right? So it's a video, right? Well, the reason it looks like they're moving is because of the player. So if you think of time and space as the disc, everything's permanently fixed, right? And you're the DVD player making it seem like everything is moving. So, and that's a physicist. That's a contemporary scientist who is highly valued by maybe half of the scientists, the ones that agree with him, you know, right? Right? You know, so if you think, okay, so in that model, nothing is moving, and I've even talked with scientists. Carl Hogan was here years ago. He wrote a book called The Little Book of the Big Bang, and I actually asked him that question in a room full of other professors. And I thought, here goes my career, being dumb, right? And I raised my hand and I said, well, but some people say that everything is basically still throughout all time and space, and it's our consciousness that makes it look like things are moving. How come we're not studying that? Because basically his whole task was to study the Big Bang. You know, how did everything, you know, start? And he looked at me, and instead of giving me grief or anything of that sort, he said, you're right, and I don't know. So I wasn't fired. I'm still here. But, you know, you get the idea that, wow, this is even more confusing, you know, than just having a couple of models. We've got lots of different models. Another theory of relativity model tells us that nothing curves in space, because space is curved, right? So the Earth is actually traveling in a straight line, right? So, whoa, if that's the case, why do we keep saying hello to the sun every morning, you know, instead of taking off somewhere? Well, because the sun is traveling in the same straight line roughly, and we're actually connected, of course, because we're both traveling that way. There's another interesting model. So, for example, this is a really crappy video, but here we go. This big. You always wondered about this?
No, it's unavailable on the full screen.
Is that what it's saying?
Yeah.
Well, you can get the idea. Oh. I'm not in Forbes. Why is this a problem? So here goes the sun cruising along. And notice, okay, rapidly flying around it are the planets. But notice, of course, they're not just staying in one place, going in a circle. They have to be following along with the sun, right? As you can imagine, right? I've got too much stuff going on here. So it's not simply like you get in grammar school, you know, where you do the model and you've got all the planets going around in a circle. Instead, of course, if you were to map that out realistically, you would really have kind of like a pattern, a frequency pattern. In fact, some people point out it's more like the double helix, triple helix, quadruple helix, whatever. So in other words, there's a pattern in the universe through living things and the planets, and that is that coils like DNA, etc. So that's still another model, right? So, and here's the kicker. In our contemporary sense, we say all of these models are true because they're all useful. They're all tools, conceptual schemas that enable us to understand certain characteristics of the phenomena we're trying to understand, right? Different tools enable us to do different things, better or worse, right? So the Earth is flat, at least from here to Wasilla, right? Which is all the people were really concerned about back in the day, when they were traveling just a short distance, right? It's not a dish like the Greeks might have thought, that's flat and round and floating on some kind of ocean or something, right? That's wrong. So, of course, people have, why does Arnie keep, is that Arnie? I don't know what, these are ads, so let me get rid of those. Okay. Well, so it's lots of models. Today, the idea is that you're only making a mistake if you think one model is true and all the others are false, right? Because that's like saying only these tools are the right tools. Well, what about French? Je parle français très bien. How come I can't use French? Because it's not a real language, says Huck on the raft with Joe. You remember? Right? Well, dadgummit, Huck, if the Frenchmen are a man, then they ought to speak like a man, etc. Why do they speak French? Right? You get the idea. That's the same dumb kind of thing, right? Use multiple tools and keep in mind that what we're doing are using conceptual models that are tools to understand phenomena that's way beyond the actual conceptual model, right? And so Galileo, in a sense, was primitive in thinking that one model was true. The Pope clearly understood multiple models are good. What's also important is the sociological conditions that might be changed if you push this, because that would say that the church had been wrong all these years. That would say that the Bible is confusing the way it's written or something, right? So you'd have to fix all of that stuff. Don't mess with it. People don't need that, right? And actually, it's pretty clear that mathematicians, astronomers, they could use different models, but why screw with a person that has no need of any of that? Which, by the way, is Moses ben Naaman, his argument in the book, The Guide to the Perplexed, medieval document that accompanied the Aristotelian corpus when it moved into the Middle Ages, Western Europe. And his basic argument is don't teach people this stuff unless they really need it. Just keep it on the, just between us, right? Right? We know it, but you don't have to tell the rubes out there pushing the carts, stocking the vegetables at Walmart. Why do they have to worry about this stuff? It just will upset them. Of course, now we know today that all the people stocking the counters at Walmart are college graduates. No, I'm just kidding. Not all of them, some of them. Okay, well, so Galileo, that should be fun. Middle Ages were not absolutely ridiculous. They were very, very interesting. We still have an awful lot of stuff from that period that we certainly know and love. The modern period, which is where we're looking to start, most famously we start with Descartes, but there are others. I mean, Descartes didn't live in that period alone, of course, and the reason he thought a lot of the things he did was because of his teachers and the people that he argued with at the various salons in Paris, and the cardinal that told him, well, prove it. That's a milieu. There's a whole bunch of folks there that we can look at. And we can, of course, look at all of them. That's crazy. And it's just like digging a hole. If you're looking for the bottom of the hole, the more you dig, the further it seems to be, right? And that's the same thing with human history. How much of it is really significant enough that we need to go find that stuff, right? Well, I would argue that today we don't do enough. That basically we've become very shallow-minded because of perhaps the internet. If you think of it, we're faced now with 48 characters being kind of the upper limit of our attention span. That's really terrible, and so on. I frequently will mention books because I grew up at a time where books were the thing we did, reading books. We'd go to school. What did we do? We got reading lists and we read the book. Didn't just like, oh, that's interesting, No, we went to the library and sat there and drooled on the pages because, of course, you would fall asleep, over these boring tomes, But we did all that. That's how you would find, like, my wife, went and met at the library, That's, how you dated back then. That was all that sort of thing. No apps on our cell phones because we didn't have phones unless they had a wire attached to the wall. And by the way, in my off-campus house, that phone had coin slots because our off-campus house didn't have a free phone for our use. Had a coin-operated phone in a phone booth in the house with a door. It was the nice wooden one. You go in, you could have your conversation, but you had to feed the coins. But that was then. So I would argue that we're reading less. There's an interesting argument by James Flynn, which gives us, not because he named it that, but Charles Murray called it this based on Flynn's work. The Flynn effect. I don't know if you've ever heard it or not, but basically when we look at the statistics from IQ testing, the newest generations end up being smarter than the previous generations. So there's a change in IQ status that keeps progressing, going up. So as a generation, you're smarter IQ-wise than I am. Your processor is faster than mine. All sorts of interesting arguments about why that might be, but it's pretty much a fact based on the data. It doesn't mean, of course, that individuals are smarter, etc. Right? This is an average, but you can't say there's nothing there. Obviously, there is. But the flip side to this is that even though the younger generations tend to be faster thinkers, solve problems faster, have a higher IQ, measurable IQ, they know less. And so there's a problem. If you have a computer and it's a really souped up, fast, double Pentium, triple, quadruple core, 8 trillion gigabytes of RAM, whatever, and, you've got all that stuff, but you didn't remember to load any information on it, it will not do anything, right? On the other hand, the old 286 IBM, doesn't have, maybe 4 megabytes of RAM, if that, right? 286 means, it's not even a Pentium yet, right? Not even an SX, so it can't use the math calculating chip that was added when they added the SX processor. It was 386 that got that, right? But if you have all the data and you're looking up something, you can find it, right? So how do we get really brilliant young people to know information? And granted, the internet is there. You have a question, where is the square where the church burned a great astronomer for no real reason? I remember it's the Plaza del Fiore. And what do I want to look up? Campo del Fiore, that's probably the best one. And then who was burned at the stake there? And you can actually see the statue there. There's a plaque on the plaza where you can see this is a stake was here. The ashes have been cleaned up. This is Middle Ages, right? So why was he burned at the stake? Because he said that the stars are little suns, just like our sun. And guess what? They're so far away, it's unbelievable. And they said, kill him! And so they did. They burned him at the stake. And guess what? Today, whatever model you pick, he's right. Right? So, that's embarrassing. Obviously, some things that the church did were irreparable, right? Although, I have to admit, he was one crazy mofo. Can I say that?
He definitely was.
Yeah, he irritated the out of everyone.
Oh, yeah.
Even went to England for a while and screwed with people's minds there.
Yeah.
They yelled at him and everything.
Because not only did he do science, but he also did like occult stuff too.
Oh yeah, well, so did Sir Isaac Newton.
Well, yeah.
In fact, when you look at the difference between science and the occult, it's like, ooh, it didn't really, didn't really take very well. So, all that's interesting. So, I had 3 credits worth of medieval, 3 credits worth of modern. Then after that, I had 19th century thought, which that's confusing, of course, because if you say 19th century, you're talking 18 something, right? Then I had contemporary philosophy. I also had existentialism, and I had American philosophy, which was all by itself, hanging out there, and we'll do some of that. Long story short, I had all these courses in a philosophy degree, right, that gave me lots of time to read texts and learn the history of philosophy in all these different areas. I did have a Chinese and Japanese thought course, so I didn't completely neglect the Asian philosophy. But you get the idea. We had lots of stuff. And here, we only have History 1 and History 2. 15 weeks for each. So we've got to really cram in a lot. And obviously, we can't expect you to read all of the stuff, especially with our contemporary attitude towards reading. I looked at a friend's recommendation for students in class, and the very first one said, read every book before class and then read it again after class. And I said, nope, not a single young person I know today will do that because they don't have the time. It's just a fact of the matter, right? You know, I mean, you might read some, but frankly, when you get right down to it, that's not the way young people spend their time today. There's too much else going on. Plus, we have such powerful visual tools, which are in a way much more powerful than that. For example, now this is not in English. I need the volume up. Shoot. How do I get the volume up? This is a touch screen. Ah, there's a knob. It's still not working. Okay. Uh-oh, watch your ears.
It's on mute.
It looks like.
Jeg blar, altså.
Du blar.
Okay, so.
Men når jeg skal tilbake, da?
Ja, da bare blar du tilbake igjen. Ta tak.
Do you see this now?
Broder Ansgar?
Ja.
Det er deg, ja.
Ja.
Så bra. Ok.
Ja, hei du.
Fatter jeg.
Hei du. Ja.
Ja, hva gjelder det?
Ja, det er denne her. Ja, vil du sitte? Takk. Ja.
Jaha.
Ja, så den, jeg har fått gjort noen ting hele formiddagen. Ja.
Nei, jeg beklager at det tar tid. Altså, skjønner vi holder på å legge om til et helt nytt system, og da skal alle ha hjelp på en gang.
Ja, ja.
Så du kommer ikke inn i den, eller?
Nei, den bare ligger der.
Ok, har du forsøkt å åpne den?
Jeg åpnet den, altså hvis det hadde vært så enkelt, så hadde jeg jo ikke tilkalt helpdesk, hadde jeg vel?
Nei, det er
Nei.
sant.
Nei. Vil du ha en kopp varmt vann?
Nei, det skal være fort gjort.
Ja.
Du bare gjør der. Sånn.
Ja.
Da er vi i gang.
Ja, altså så langt kom jeg også.
Ok.
Ikke sant? Men så stoppet det opp, og så var jeg redd for at noe av teksten skulle forsvinne, så jeg turte ikke å gå videre.
Åja, ok. Nei, men du skjønner, inni her
Mm.
så ligger det kanskje flere hundre sider med lagret tekst.
Mm.
Så for å komme videre, så tar du tak i et ark på den måten her, og så liksom blar du over på neste side sånn. Da fortsetter teksten der.
Jeg blar, altså.
Du blar.
Men når jeg skal tilbake, da?
Ja, da bare blar du tilbake igjen. Tar tak der, og så sånn. Der. Så er du tilbake til den teksten du hadde seg.
Ok, så den slutter der,
Ja.
og så fortsetter den der, ja. Ok, men når jeg skal avslutte dagen, hva gjør jeg da?
Da bare slår du sammen permene
Ja,
på den måten der. Sånn. Der lukket der, ligger alt lagret inni der.
altså jeg risikerer ikke å miste noe av teksten her.
Nei,
Altså.
alt ligger lagret inni her. Ja, i tilfelle du setter fyr på, eller ja, det er kanskje litt sannsynlig.
Ja, ok. Nei, men for det er noe med det at ikke sant, når du har holdt på med skriftruller,
Ja.
så tar det litt grann tid å konvertere til å bla i en bøk. Mm. Ja. Ja, ok, det er litt godt.
Hva er det?
Ja, men du, før du går, jeg må bare gå igjen en gang til. Altså, jeg åpner sånn,
Ja, riktig.
og så, hva du kaller det?
Blar.
Jeg blar,
Ja, blar videre.
blar frem og tilbake. Og
Teksten
når,
her ligger der.
ja. Og når jeg er ferdig, så bare lukker jeg den.
Ja,
Flott.
Fint det.
Kjempefint.
Ja, flott det.
Ja, men du, vent, ikke sant? Nå er det sånn igjen, nå får jeg ikke åpnet den.
Men at du er på feil side. Du åpner fra andre siden.
Så det er ikke likegyldig, det,
Ja,
altså.
åpner fra den siden der. Sånn. Der. Der nå.
Ja vel.
Har du lest manualen, eller?
Manualen?
Det skal følge med som manualen som brukerveiledning. Det sitter den der. Der, vet du.
Å ja,
I
den, ja.
står alt sammen.
Ja, ja, men ikke sant, der har du samme problemet. Får den ikke opp.
Ok, det skulle du kanskje tenkt på.
So, a couple interesting things to mention. I mean, that's obviously pretty silly. But now you'll remember, wow, when they switched from papyrus rolls to, you know, well, they didn't go right to a book, obviously. They went instead to collections of pages that they had. But they didn't obviously go to a book until, of course, the Gutenberg press, right? You know, so You imagine that was like the internet when that happened, because all of a sudden people that couldn't even think about buying a book before literally could now afford it. You know, you still had to be rich, but you know, and of course they also converted Latin into German. Remember Martin Luther changed the Bible into the German text, and it was published, you know, so that people could literally buy incredibly. By the way, we have the first Gutenberg Bible. We have a copy of it, not one of the originals, but a facsimile of it in the Luzak Library in the Stevens Room. I don't know if the Stevens Room is open right now. They've had it closed for a while because of the new wing, the way they were, you know, redoing the library. But if you ever get the chance and stop in the Stevens Room, go look. It's of course in Latin with no spaces between the words, so there's not much chance you'll enjoy actually reading it, but you'll at least get to see what it's a two-volume work, facsimile of the original copies. If you're into seeing the real copy, one of the 24 remaining copies from the Gutenberg press of the Bible, there is one in the Library of Congress, the first building, right out by the Capitol building. So if you ever get to visit there, as you enter into that, the lobby, it's in a case right next to where you come in. So pretty cool. But so that's one thing. You know, obviously, you know, changing to a book was a big thing back then. The other thing you get from that is because of it being a visual and silly, you'll remember it, right? You know, I doubt if you'll ever forget that silly video, right? By the way, there's a context too, because apparently I think the Swedes and the Danes make fun of one another, and so I don't know if you speak Danish or Swedish or whatever, but Norwegian, maybe it was Norwegian, I'm not sure, but Norwegian TV makes fun of Danes. So Ansgar was a Danish monk. That's kind of a, you know, an ethnic slight, you know, and so that's okay. So you get all, you know, that was powerful and fast. You know, you get that pretty fast, and you remember it. So when we go back and think about, well, why are young people so enamored of visual stimuli, you know, videos, movies, YouTube videos, all that kind of thing, and why are books less read today? Although, well, I should change that. There are folks that will argue that more books are being read today than ever, and there are more books available because of cheaper printing costs, because you can, I for years would get tons of these crappy novels and things from all sorts of people asking me to read their novel and review it, you know, on Amazon or something, and you know they could basically print, you know, like 50 copies and send them out to people in the hopes that you'd get all these marvelous reviews and you'd suddenly become a world famous, you know, novelist, you know. But of course, what happens is people are not going through the editorial process. You don't have the editors that know what will sell and what's good. You don't have people telling the person, this is crap. No one's going to want to read this, right? You know, so there's tons of that kind of stuff. I was reading a book just last night called Kill All Normies.
Oh, yeah.
You heard of this one? Kill All Normies.
Yeah.
By the way, I wouldn't recommend it. Reading it because Breitbart, if you read Breitbart on the web, mentions it and says you ought to read this. Well, so of course, I go read stuff that people tell me to read. And it just gobs and gobs of all these online groups and organizations that I've never heard of, but are on the web, actually have more viewers daily than CNN and other media like that. So these things have more power in the media among the people that read them, and the numbers are hundreds of thousands of people reading this stuff. Reading one particular guy, it's basically spewing crap at everybody, but they like his crap, so they go and they read him every day because they love the crap that he puts out, right? That's just absolutely amazing. So there's all this kind of stuff that's being read. But is this good? Is this the fake news that's not going to help us at all? Ugh. Well, that's another borderline that gets into a problem with what is going to be useful. If you write off, say, oh, this is absolute trash, don't read any of this stuff, but guess what? There's all sorts of money to be made in these kinds of online vlogs and things of that sort, right? So who knows? Who knows where any of this is going to go? And by the way, one of the things it points out is, guess what? It was stuff like this that got our current president elected. Whoa. I mean, Breitbart, remember, was one of the reasons that he was elected, right? So that's kind of amazing. We don't know where all that stuff's going to go. But if we go back and think, well, okay, maybe there are other ways for you to learn information besides reading books. It's scary, though, because at the moment we don't really have a clue what would be the best way of encouraging people to know things. I mean, if the question requires, well, which king of England was the one that killed his nephews, right? You could go and Google that. But if you happen to read it and enjoy that stuff, you would know Richard III, right off, or something like that. But how do you get a handle on that kind of stuff? By the way, it might be more than Richard III. Don't trust me. By the way, I'm old and I forget lots of stuff, so you should always check everything I say. Verify, right? Because what I might be giving you is fake news. Who knows what you can get from that. So the Flynn effect, pretty impressive. You guys are brilliant. Me less so, but I've got some experience. Remember, it's starting to fail on me now, But nonetheless, hopefully, I can at least inspire you to go out and become as warped and crazy as I am. So but I have excuses. The Army made me learn lots of languages. I was a Russian, German, and French linguist in the Army for 16 years, 9 months, and 3 days. Who's counting? I got a full retirement, though, because the Army thought, well, the Russians are our friends now, and they didn't need me. I was expensive, so they decided to offer me a choice. I could either retire, full retirement, or I could go to Fort Hood and eat dirt. And I told them I'd rather retire. So I retired, came up here, and I've been teaching here ever since. So that's cool. I was hoping to retire, actually. I was just amazed I got to retire almost 4 years early, which is like, wow, that usually never happens. In fact, the Army has already paid me more since I've retired than they paid me while I was in the Army. So that's kind of cool. Thank you, by the way, because you guys are really the ones paying me for all of that. Okay, so business. So we're in early modern philosophy. The syllabus is here. I'm not sure, do we go from 1 to 220? Is that the same as what everybody has?
1 to 215.
Yeah, 215.
215? I think the extra 5 minutes is supposed to account for a day off that we get during the semester that we have to make up. So, but you know, we don't really leave right at 2:15 anyway. You can leave. By the way, you can leave anytime you feel like. Actually, so rules of how the class should go. My main rule is I don't have any rules. So, you could bring food and eat if you like, as long as it's not the kind of food that will drive everyone else out of the room. And make sure you clean up. Don't make a mess. That's important. You can have your devices on, obviously. In fact, that's great, because if I say something absolutely doofus, please check me on the spot if you think, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. Galileo Galilei, his father was Vincente Galileo. Is that right? Maybe. You can check it right on the spot. See? And then you can tell me, you could say, no, you're wrong. It was Vincenzo or something, right?
Yeah.
And even if we're like on Facebook or something, you can come up here and say, dumb, that was wrong. Whatever. That's good. So you could use that. But if you are using a device, please don't distract your neighbors and the people behind you, etc. Like in the opera, it's always annoying when somebody 5 rows down has their phone on while it's dark, and you're sitting there staring at this bright light, and I'm kind of like those little creatures in that movie, bright light, bright light. Is it? Anybody knows what movie I just referred to? No. Gremlins, right? Gremlins. Sorry.
Don't get them wet.
I'm mentally ill, by the way, just so you know. It's a requirement for the job, though. So. Okay, so you can bring your devices, use them, food. No smoking, no marijuana, no LSD. LDS is okay. If you have questions, please feel free to raise your hand, or not. You could just say, hey, I heard that such and such, and that's cool. So we could have conversations. This is a small group. We're going to have more of a seminar kind of discussion of things. Speaking of which, it would help if you did read, the resources. The text that I have assigned, if you're curious where it came from, etc., it's really a collection of lots of philosophy. You'll notice it goes all the way back to Plato. And we're not starting with Plato. The thing is, I would also teach ancient and medieval philosophy, and then I could use that one text for both courses. So that's why if I ordered, which I have ordered, and it's way more expensive, the individual volumes that build that set, it's actually way cheaper, or way more expensive to do it that way than to just assign the one text, especially if the school district had bought the I don't know, any of you in the Alaska Middle College program? So those books should be provided for you from them. And I actually wanted to save them money too. So you'll find Descartes. You have the Meditations there, for example. Spinoza's Ethics, right? And so these are the texts, the main corpus of philosophy up until Quine. And Quine and Derrida are the last two articles. Quine, Willard Van Orman Quine's article that's in the text. Actually, by the way, a lot of these are absolutely on the web somewhere. You can search for them. Quine's article ought not be there because it's still copyright, but it is there, of course. It's on some Marxist site somewhere, believe it or not. But if you think these are absolutely essential reading, if you can do it. Quine's text is the one that made him famous in 1952. Derrida is famous for being inscrutable. Is that a good word? Inscrutable? No one knows what the heck he's talking about. But everybody thinks, in Europe at least, that he's fantastic. So, okay. So that's why I have the text as it is, and it would help if you read like the Kant, and then we're going to talk about Kant. And, so why was Kant so important? Did he solve the problem that was set by David Hume? Absolutely. Is it over with? No. Nothing ever ends this way. Progress keeps going. I do believe there has been progress, by the way. Easy way to prove it, microwaves. You want to make a dinner, you put frozen food into the microwave, hit 2 minutes, ding, and you've got pasta or something. Right? So obviously progress. The fact that I'm still alive and healthy at 67. Granted, people can live till they're 100 or so. It's in our genes, right? There's you look at the little tails of our DNA, the telomeres, there's roughly 50 of them. Our cells reproduce every second year or something, most of them. And each time they do that, one of the telomeres fall off. So guess what? You have roughly 100 years and you run out of telomeres and your cells get old, and they said, new cell, and there's like, no new cell, and you're dead. That's it. So we could all live roughly 100 years, but guess what? If you don't have enough food, or if you don't have clean water, or you don't have a good sewer system like London during the plague. I mean, when's the last time any of you had a plague? No, we don't get plague anymore. Thank somebody, right? So no plague for us, right? We don't generally chop people's hands off for stealing bread. There's progress, ethical, moral progress, technological progress. So that's absolutely clear to me. The same thing has happened in thought. Does that mean everything? No, you can't. You can't just carte blanche say everything we do is new and improved. Because obviously some things are repetitious. Rape, for example. The Romans were proud of it. If we go back and look at what's the name of the town? Anybody remember? I'll just put founding of Rome. So that's something I used to remember. Sabine. The Sabine women. Obviously not Roman, but Romantic period, maybe? No, can't be. It's too early. But, the Romans are absolutely proud of their founding, which was by a bunch of hooligans that all got together, decided to found a city, then decided, wait, you know what, we need some women. So they invited the next town to come over to a party, and when they came over, they killed all the men and stole all the women. And that started Rome. So the Romans are absolutely fond of their historical founding by rape, the rape of the Sabines. It's not my fault, by the way. That's just history, right? But today we don't think founding a city by, stealing other people's women is like a cool thing to do, right? In fact, my wife just yesterday was yelling, "He's a monster! He's a monster!" Anybody know who I'm talking about? Guy from Wisconsin that just got caught because he had kidnapped the girl, killed her parents.
Oh yeah, the 16-year-old girl.
Shot their heads off with a shotgun, took her, kept her in his house. Not. The Romans would have said, "Hey, join us," You're the kind of guy we need. Shot their heads off? Wow! I would have never thought of that. Imagine. Sorry. Okay. how do we get an A? Everybody wants an A? Everybody can have an A. I have them right here. But really, we're in a consumer-based environment, right? So I get to teach when students sign up for my courses. You'll notice there's supposed to be 14 of you. At least a couple emailed me and said they couldn't make it. But 14, that's great, because that means the course is a go, no problem. If I didn't have 14 or, well, whatever students, then I wouldn't have had the course. I'd basically be out of work, and you'd see me standing on Old Seward with a cardboard sign, we'll teach for food, or something, right? So I need students to like me and sign up for the course so that I can actually have the opportunity to screw with your minds the way I do, right? Which I love doing, right? In order to do that, students need to like me, of course, and say, hey, take Jamison. And one of the ways I've discovered that works really well is if I give everybody A's. For some reason, people like, hey, he gives you A's, it's easy. Oh, okay, I'll sign up for him. What is philosophy anyway? That's okay, that's okay. It's like math without the symbols. No. Sorry, I never said that before, but it's true. So I make it easy, but at the same time it's difficult. I mean, you could get an A, it's easy. How do I do it? I ask you to write essays. So I have essay tests, 3 essay tests. Each essay test, I give you 6 questions. You pick 3. You don't have to write answers to all 6. But if you pick 3, find the one you like and answer that. And I give you an A provided you give me at least 300 words for each question that you pick. And guess what? When you email it to me, I check the document and see if there's 300 words or 900 for all 3, right? And if there are, I give you an A, and then I read it. You see, right? So the volume is what's important here, and there's a reason for it. Remember I said I was a linguist in the Army. I'm absolutely convinced that learning, unless it's like a physical, how to hammer a nail kind of thing, the first time you hit your thumb, the second time glance it off your thumb, the third time you finally get it right. And now you've learned how to hammer a nail, right? But most of the education we get is vocabulary. So you're learning the specialized vocabulary of a particular topic. Anthropology, what vocabulary does an anthropologist use, or a psychologist use, or a nurse, etc. You have to learn how hypodemic neurals work, when you give people shots and things and stuff. So learning is vocabulary. That's like language learning. And the way you learn languages is by immersion. And so I give you lots of stuff to read. We talk about philosophy. And I ask you to write and use the vocabulary that we're doing. I'm going to give you grades by volume. So, you don't have to worry about whether your writing is absolutely sterling, perfect punctuation, etc. It doesn't have to be that. Don't worry about that. What I'm looking for is for you to send me your thoughts on the topic and not to worry about whether you're right or wrong. In fact, there are no right or wrong answers. These are the kinds of questions that you can have different opinions about them, right? Hobbes can be viewed as an Aristotelian in contrast to Descartes' rationalism. That's true? Well, you might say no, but I think so, yes, right? And then describe his theory of knowledge. You could read his Leviathan, which is in your text, or you can even just go and Google it, and some kind soul will give you easily 300 words explaining how that works, right? And that's fine, right? So you're picking up the vocabulary, right? So I'm happy with that. And by the way, most people do a good job that way. Once they stop worrying about how good the essays need to be, or whether they're going to fail or not, you're not worried about that anymore. You can enjoy yourself and actually say what you think. So 3 tests that work that way. Then I also have a term project, which is the big one. This is a term paper, basically. Term project, 3,000 words. Sounds like a lot, but if you do bits and pieces of it during the semester, it will be done, maybe even before the end of the semester. And by the way, you could email me your drafts as you go and ask me, what do you think of this, etc. Do you have any idea? I'm working on Charles Taylor, and I really find his concept of the self fascinating. What do you think, or whatever? And I might send you some interesting stuff on Charles Taylor. And by the way, the topics are from this list, and so here you go. I have a list of living, mostly, not all of them. For example, C.S. Lewis. He's on my list, but notice he's dead. He died the day that JFK got shot. If you grew up and you loved the Narnia stories and things of that sort. He wrote philosophical works too, by the way. So it's not just the Narnia stories. So if you pick C.S. Lewis, I'd prefer you to write more about his philosophical works, like Words or things of that sort. But here's a list of folks and some quick links in case you don't know who they are. You don't have to use the source at the link, but that's just an idea so you know who they are. These are living folks. There are some, as I said, that are dead, like C.S. Lewis. Some are almost dead. They're not completely dead, but they're just mostly dead. That's, like The Princess Bride, if you're familiar with that. For example, I have Pope Benedict Joseph Ratzinger listed. If you know, he's retired, but he's still alive. But the reason he retired was because he thought he was going to die pretty soon. But he's already been there now, 6 years? So he's been retired that long, still living in Rome, and he still has lunch with Pope Francis. So that's kind of cool. Not dead yet. And his philosophy is absolutely great. By the way, his philosophy books are better than Pope Francis's books. They're really very different. But that's just me. Hans Kuhn. It's about the same age. They were both he and Pope Benedict were colleagues, teaching at the same university. Umberto Eco, we lost him. Fantastic philosopher, author. Actually, some of his later books are absolutely screwy, but what can I? But if you're familiar with the Name of the Rose, they made a movie with Sean Connery, a really good book and interesting movie. Peter Berger died relatively recently. Wrote hundreds of books. Really influenced me when I was in college, etc. So there are some folks there that you can look at. And if you have a favorite, and the favorite isn't on the list, you can email me, can I do so-and-so? And I might go, well, yeah, I've never heard of this person. But there you go. You can. I've learned a lot from students picking folks. And I will also pose a quiz question in each lecture. For example, today I could ask you, does the Earth go around the sun, or does the sun go around the Earth? What do you think of that question? Is that a misleading question? Is there a right answer?
It's a conversation starter.
Yes. So we figure if you email me about a paragraph on your thoughts on whether the Earth goes around the sun or the sun goes around the Earth, that would be cool, right? Is that good? Get the idea? And so I could give you grades. By the way, the grade on that is the same. If I get a response, you get an A for that. And then I read it, right? Is that cool? It's kind of like a contract, you know? Only once did I have a student email me a term paper that started off with about a paragraph of conscientious writing about a topic. And then he ran out of time and he went, wee, all the way home. And I was like, oh, that's terrible. But I gave him the A. Because I promised, right? But I said to him, you should, that's terrible, etc. And hopefully he'll feel bad for the rest of his life for doing that. Unless he actually emails me more. Are we almost done?
I have to get to the bus.
You have to get to the
Yeah,
bus?
sorry.
Oh, the bus.
Thank you, Mr. James.
All right, thanks for taking the class, and I'll see you Thursday. Yeah, we still have 15 minutes or so, right? But if you have to go, notice I am trying to video this, and then I post them so that if you can't come, you could just go and watch the video. So it's not an online course. It's not even a hybrid course. Because if I try to make it an online course, I can't do it from Eagle River. If I make it a hybrid course, I'm sure that would piss off a lot of people. So basically, that's just an additional way that you could use to, right, you get it, right? Okay. Okay, so.
I have a question. After this semester, are you going to go back to Eagle River to teach there?
I believe so.
Okay.
I can't say for sure because, number one, I'm not sure what knowledge is. I have my belief, right? My belief is that knowledge is a collection of true statements. True statements are statements that groups of fluent speakers agree are true in a particular linguistic context. But it's also pretty clear that linguistic contexts evolve over time. So for example, when I was a kid, butter was good for you. Then it became bad for you. Then it became good for you again. Then it became bad for you again. What is it right now? I've lost track. I don't know. Should we eat butter or not?
Not anymore, handfuls.
Yeah. It used to be that women were supposed to be subservient to men. That's apparently changed. Now I believe it's the other way around. Men are supposed to be subservient to women. Is that right? Ooh. This might be a bad topic. I don't know. A little edgy there. But yeah, so I do know, though, that a lie has to be when someone knows a statement to be true and deliberately tells you that it's not true with the intention of fooling you about it, right? And for example, a lot of the things that people say, he's lying, is not such a statement. It's an interpretation of something, so he can't be lying about that. It's an interpretation, right? And that's pretty strict, because for example, that's a camera. That's true. Everyone here agrees? See how that works? It is, really. So we're happy with that, right? That's a good camera. Is that true?
Well, depends on what resolution.
Exactly. So the problem is that's subject to interpretation, so that statement is neither true nor false. So for someone else to say, that's a terrible camera,
Is it backwards?
I can't say that's a lie, because that's not the kind of statement that could be true or false. Just that's a pet peeve of mine, because we've had a lot of people making claims that so-and-so is lying about things, and I'm looking at what they're saying that they're lying about, and that can't be a lie, because that's not the kind of statement that could be a lie, etc. Does that make sense? course, that's also subject to the kind of attitude people have over what kind of statements are true or false. I can't really say, hey, every true statement has to be, because there are people out there that say that's not true. And then I'm, hopeless case. I can't convince them because they don't agree. They're wrong, but they don't agree. So, I'm not going to be able to persuade them. That's kind of silly. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
But I hope that it will be back in Eagle River. They're fixing the building, so their emails to me have been very confusing. Because on the one hand, I thought this might be the situation for just a couple of weeks, and then we'll be back there. But apparently not. When I asked about buying a pass, they said, yep, buy a pass. So I think this is the way this will be for this semester. Probably would be safest to get people in. But I don't know. It's very inconvenient for people that live out there to have to come in here for this. But a lot of people started signing up for my courses once they were moved here because they were here. So that is just, I could probably be in both places at once.
Yeah.
I can do that now. I have an Oculus Rift, and so I can be virtually all over the world while still in my living room, actually. I love it. It's fantastic. Okay. So, I actually intended on giving a discussion about the medieval review, etc., to move us into the middle, the modern period. So I do have these notes here, which of course you're welcome to look at anything. Copernicus, lots and lots of stuff about Copernicus, by Copernicus on the web. One of the main reasons I would like to mention him is when I was talking about Galileo, and I said that reading a contemporary biography of Galileo convinced me that Galileo was actually kind of dumb. He was one of those folks that doing math, was a math teacher, interested in astronomy, made his own telescopes. By the way, he wasn't the one that invented them, right? He heard about them, and that gave him the idea, and so he started making his own. And by the way, his turned out to be better than the guy who did invent them in the Netherlands, right? So, and then he started giving them to other people, to persuade them to believe the things that he was seeing with them. This is a problem, though. He had an eye stigma, and he was making the lenses for his eye, and as a result, other people couldn't see what he saw from his own telescopes. So it's just so much intricate, dumb stuff involved in all of this. Absolutely. Pisa, the Tower of Pisa. Did he drop stuff off of that tower? Absolutely hilarious statement where the guy says, when they were having philosophical arguments around that tower, it was probably not a safe place to be because they were dropping all this stuff off of the tower. Yeah, Tower of Pisa. Yes, everyone's familiar with it. It's kind of, famous. I've been in it, by the way. Again, thanks to, whenever I say that, it's my Oculus Rift. I go in there, look around. That's great. Have you ever heard of this thing? I've got to hurry because we're almost done, right? Oculus Rift. I guess it's mean and rotten because you've basically got to have $1,000 to spend to get one. I don't see a commercial though.
Greetings. Looking by long-term, it's actually helpful. Because, well, the pixel's bigger, there's only going to be one pixel, and it's bigger, therefore it's easier.
You know what? That's actually kind of silly. I've got my own videos that I can show you on YouTube. example. So for those. This is a video with this camera of my laptop screen at home where I'm using my Oculus Rift. So you're just looking at the square portion, but with the goggles, I'm actually going to be totally surrounded, like, you know, you're just standing here.
But I'll show you what some of the. I'm going to move back a little bit.
So
And then I'm going
this-
to come
This program I'm using is Google Earth.
from a vertical to a horizontal.
By the way, one of my friends lives in an apartment right there. This is in Köln, Germany.
Somewhere in this building.
So that's,
I think it's roughly around here.
it's not, I learned it's on the other side of the building. But I had the right building, he told me where it was, so.
You were inside, huh?
Building on the street here.
No, actually you can go in the stores, they have some videos of stores.
For example, here
So this is the street view,
on the Rhine.
right?
River
And as you're, so you just see what is ahead of me in
structure
the
here.
view that I'm looking at. But as I move, and I realize it's disorienting when you're looking at just the flat, but when you're walking around, you go like this and you don't get dizzy from it. You don't with the goggles on either. And they are still, you can get videos, but
Steve says
these are all still photos of
smaller
the
footprint.
area where I'm looking around. Attention, Fußgänger is your pavement. Right? Foot going, you know, Fußgänger?
Right.
You can even go into the shop.
This is nicht meine Schuld. It's not my fault. This is inside the building in a furniture store. Okay, well, I better quit though. Do you have questions for me?
For sale. The tag is close enough, you can even see how much the item is.
You can watch these at home.
Here's the
Did you
tag.
see how I got to it? Yes.
Just have a small question.
Yeah. Small question?
Yeah.
Really little one?
I'm not planning on buying
Have
today.
you tried using like
This is the info form.
computer video instead of recording it on this camera? Like record it with an application?
Mobile.
I don't know how to do that.
Oh, okay.
We really need to
So-
run out.
What I'm doing here is I've got that camera
To left.
watching my laptop screen. I just put the camera aimed at,
Here gain spike, you can go farther there. if you want
that's, I'm not a genius.
to.
You guys are.
But it's hard to choose.
So if you figure out how to do that, you can send me the YouTube link or something and I'll watch it, see if I can
Let's go
figure
back
it out.
outside.
Do you have any questions? Is this fun?
Yeah, do we have any, today's quiz?
Yes. Email me your thoughts about the Earth going around the Sun or the Sun going around the Earth.
Like in one of the apartments,
Or what?
the mobile shop again, betting.
Are these gonna be verbal every week, or are you gonna have them typed out, like on Blackboard? Like with some
I'm gonna
responses?
just give them verbally in class and then they should be recorded on that. I used to put them on my blog, and it occurred to me that, well, that way people don't have to watch the videos if they didn't.
Obviously, for married people, since they're separate mattresses.
But if you want me to do that, I can do it.
I'm okay with it verbal. I was just wondering. So we're emailing it to you?
Email me your thoughts on the problem of does the Earth go around the Sun or does the Sun go? Were you here when I talked about that?
I will.
Okay. Yeah, because it's not a clear-cut question. Today, I think the answer is it's relative to the
Makes things difficult.
the models that you ought to use for why you asked the question. So
There's the Microsoft building right
an astronomer friend of mine, you might argue that the
the street.
Earth goes around the Sun.
We
Absolutely. But guess what? I happen to know that the model he uses himself to look for planets at other solar systems
footprint here.
is the Earth-centered model. Because that's the one astronomers use because that's so much easier to do the calculations. So you assume that the Earth is still in space, and then you can just calculate where everything is moving around it, right? So in other words, he himself uses mostly the Earth-centered model, even though he would agree. That's Travis Rector, if you know him. He's on sabbatical this year, I believe. But
we're across the harbor.
obviously, pardon?
Yeah, but that's just for projection, not really. I mean, planets still go around the sun, and it's the gravitational well. So it's not really, but for detection wise, for detecting planets around a star, they can use that.
What I'm sensing in your answer is, well, but this is really the case, right? Whereas this is a model that we could use for this and this, or maybe we could use this model for this, but this is really the way it is. Well, but that's preference for a particular model.
This is the shock lot.
I mean, I'm just, offering this as kind of a debate kind of issue, because even that model is dependent on our believing or interpreting things in a certain way. That you're saying mass is significant, for example, because you can't, if you give everything its mass, then the solar system has to be centered around the strongest mass. Right? Well, but that's the model, right? But if your main concern is appearance to you, standing here, mass is not involved. It's instead a matter of what's observable, and from our perspective here,
Right, well, I mean, at that
everything
point,
goes around my position on
yeah,
the spot.
at that point, you're using relative, but not actual, how to say, scientific.
I could just picture someone saying that that's really the case.
Yeah,
And how am I going to argue, against them that way? That's it. You see why it would be interesting to discuss?